hearings, we stream them live to YouTube and we advertise that so that folks can tune in if they would like to watch the hearing. Last administrative thing I need to cover here, guys, is going over our hearing script that basically just covers the procedure for the hearing, and then we'll jump right into it. So this is the November 17th, 2021 session of the Zoning Hearing Examiner docket. My name is David Sturkey. I'm the Zoning Hearing Examiner for the City of Cincinnati, and I'll preside over this hearing. The case before us today is case number ZH20210161. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the Zoning Hearing Examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any opposing party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing unless a party has submitted evidence or testimony in the form of writing prior to this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. The applicant, the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. If there were anyone here from the public, they would then have an opportunity to speak after the applicant had presented its case. I'll give our zoning plans examiner, Doug Owen, an opportunity to provide any testimony that he would like. In the event that any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to this application, the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut that testimony and or argument offered in opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make a closing statement. So for our purposes here today, guys, I'll give each of you, however you guys want to orient this presentation. I just want to hear a little bit of background, what your plan is and why you think it's appropriate for me to grant these variances and exceptions. And however you guys want to present that is totally fine with me. One or all of you can make that presentation. I'll then give Doug an opportunity to speak. You guys can respond to any questions I have, anything that Doug said, and then make any closing remarks. After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or to make any comments. I may also refuse to consider hearsay testimony. This generally means evidence you would like to introduce that consists of statements made by someone who's not present at the hearing today. In the event of any technical difficulties with our video conferencing technology, we'll do our best to troubleshoot those on the fly, but to the extent there's some defect that prevents us from meaningfully going forward with the hearing, I may continue or postpone this hearing, and that'll be at my discretion. Okay, last thing I need to do is just swear in all of our witnesses. And so if you intend on providing any testimony here today, making any statements, asking any questions, doing anything other than just strictly observing here today, then you need to be sworn in. And so if that is you, if you could raise your right hand, I need everyone to answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I do.
I do.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. All right. So who's going to be taking the lead here on the presentation?
I will, Philip Piercy.
Okay, Mr. Piercy, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. DCI has operated clinic here back since the 1970s. The building's been added on to several times over the years. I think the last edition it's been a while, but is on the eastern side of the site. The building basically fronts E McMillan all along between Dover and Sims. The desire here is to update the clinic. It's gotten quite a bit of age on it now, and to bring in a new, up-to-date, more modern clinic. The clinic's not growing in size. It's currently 40 stations. It will remain 40 stations, and they'll have offices in here. And so the challenge was to how do we maintain the service to the patients, which is life-saving services that they can't be interrupted. How do we maintain those services and construct a new up-to-date clinic? And so the design team was challenged with that and have proposed to build a building back in the southeast corner where the existing parking lot resides that would allow the building to be constructed, become operational before the existing facility is demolished. And so basically all the variances are as a result of that desire to maintain support and service to the patients. So with the building being built in the back, we're unable to meet the requirement to have the building up on the street frontage because that building will be torn down where the existing one is. to try to mitigate those concerns, the architect had met previously with the Walnut Hills Neighborhood Association, discussed the project and the plan, the layout. And as part of that discussion, in mitigation to the neighbors, we had proposed to provide like a pocket park in the northeast corner where McMillan and Sims intersect. And that was something that the neighbors felt good about and liked. And we've also proposed as mitigation of not having a building up on the street is provide a screen wall that will screen the parking lot so that you won't see the parking lot from McMillan. And then, so that's kind of the variance request and all for the building's not set up. I think there's also a transparency requirement that we had looked at, the existing building that was added on to last on McMillan. It didn't meet it along McMillan. And I think we obtained a variance back at that time. And the staff report, they talk about the real frontage now would maybe be considered Dover because the majority of the building is on Dover. The site sets up quite a few feet higher than Dover. And the fact that part of the building has the majority of the windows in it because it's some office space. Some of the service areas and the clinical areas, we would not have as many windows from us, security and visibility standpoint for the patients. We also may explain some about the parking requirement variance. DCIO operates about 200 clinics across the country or more. They often see that the parking requirements in a lot of cities are spaced on a clinic use lumped in, the dialysis clinics lumped in with just a typical doctor's visit. And the dialysis clinics operate completely differently. The patients come, stay several hours, and then change shifts, and maybe another group of patients would come after that. So they don't have patients lined up like you would at a doctor's office waiting in a waiting room to be seen. They are scheduled events that, typically they start early morning so people can get their treatments early, maybe, 6 to 9, then again, 10 to 1 kind of time frame. So they can get early and earlier and on with their day, or, so those that can come in the middle of the day. Most of the patients do not drive to the facility. They're either shuttled or are brought by family members. It's recommended that they not drive right after their treatment. And so the majority of patients, because of the time frame they're there, they're whoever dropping them off, do not stay at the clinic. They drop them off, leave, come back and pick them up because of the time frame it takes to receive the treatments. So the parking need for a dialysis clinic is just completely different from a typical doctor's office. And based on their experience all over the country, they have understand and a baseline for how much parking is typically used for patients, and it typically never exceeds 40% of the patient treatment stations. So this one with 40 stations, we're looking at maybe 16 parking spaces at the absolute most that would be needed by patients. And then based on how this clinic is staffed, we've looked at, the staff rotate in and out, and we tried to pick the maximum time that we could totally have everybody in the clinic at one time, and that's 25. So at the absolute most we would ever use is 41 spaces, and the site has 46. We could have obtained a few more spaces by building out the parking in the northeast corner, but that's where we talked to the neighbors about having that pocket park, and it's just with the fact that we don't need the parking, it doesn't make sense to disturb the park with additional parking. I think the structure in the park, the pergola, is also a variance just because it's in the front yard. But again, that's part of the park and part of something the neighbors were interested in. I'm trying to remember if I've covered all of them. Do y'all have any additional questions? I guess also the parking, not only the count, but to be located kind of in front or beside the building, and that's where we provided the screen wall as well, and it's just not possible to put the parking behind the building when we're trying to build the building and keep the others in place.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, I'm looking at the plans right now. So the proposed building will essentially be in the southwest corner of the existing site where the parking lot is now.
Yes.
Okay. And which portion of the existing building is going to be demolished?
Basically, I'm not, which plan are you what sheet are you looking at?
I'm at, what is it? C51, just that whole submission.
C51, so yeah, so all that hatched area, I'm gonna look at C5. C51 shows the new building, and then up in the northwest west corner, the two portions of the building that remain. So this is kind of the completed version. And so currently from the edge of the building, kind of where the parking is now, the existing building runs across fronting McMillan all the way to Sims, and that portion is what's going to be demolished.
From a square footage standpoint, roughly 3/4 of the existing building will be demolished.
Yeah, the C5.0, if you have that available to you, that shows kind of how it would look when it first gets built and the existing building still remains, and there's a large hatched area in the northeast corner that indicates the portion of the building that will get demolished.
Gotcha. I see. Okay. And the Pocket Park, is that in the southeast corner?
Northeast intersection of Sims and McMillan.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was oriented there properly. Okay. Let's see. I think that's all the questions I have right now. Mr. Kramer, did you want to add anything?
Significantly, no. I do know that our office has been working with the Walnut Hill neighborhood for quite some time, probably for about a year before, well, actually, plus or minus when the pandemic first hit of March of 2020. There were meetings before and after with the neighborhood association trying to get them comfortable with this development and how it was being implemented. That's where the pocket park, the screen wall, the pergola all came in, not to make this a destination park, but obviously more of just a neighborhood welcoming entrance to that neighborhood. Those conversations have generated some very good relationship between DCI and the neighborhood, and they're very excited about how this is developing as throughout this whole design. So it's taken a while to get to this point, but they're on board with the layout and not having the parking on the street and the screen wall and the park itself.
Okay. Great. Doug, anything you want to add?
I'd just reiterate a couple points from my staff report that basically, this being in a CCP district, we do generally like to have buildings built to the lot line, built to the corner, not only for a consistency point of view, but also to encourage those commercial uses that are in those buildings. So being a dialysis clinic, this is a somewhat unique use. It's not the typical business that you would see going into a pedestrian-oriented district. So, this facility has been here for decades, I believe. So we haven't had any major issues with the use itself, and with the proposed redevelopment of the site, it does present those unique circumstances for the dialysis clinic where they have to keep all their existing patients going with their treatment during construction. So it really prevents the demolition of any portion of the building before the new building is up, which makes it basically impossible to build along that same frontage along McMillan all the way out to Sims. So, and also, you know, that being said, aside from that fact, you know, a dialysis clinic is not your typical pedestrian oriented business where you're going to want ground floor transparency that will, you know, invite interest on the pedestrian's part. You know, they're not selling products to the public. This is a medical service that people are seeking out prior to their arrival. And so there's not like there's not any walk-up business demand, which would typically be benefited by having the building along the street with a large amount of transparency. So you know, I completely agree with the arguments that were made previously about the parking. You know, site has been in operation for quite some time, and they're pretty familiar with what their parking demand will be. So I'm inclined to agree that, you know, the 46 spaces they're proposing would be sufficient for their use. And if there is occasional overflow, there is a substantial amount of street parking in the area as well, if that's ever needed. But I don't believe that it would be. So yeah, and then, you know, also going back to the building placement argument, by not continuing that frontage along McMillan, I believe that they have come up with a very good solution, as opposed to having that all paved as a larger parking area, which would likely not be needed. They have opted to install that pocket park with the pergola in that top corner. So that would be something that would be much more beneficial to the community than a surface parking lot would be. So we are supportive of all of the requested relief.
Okay, thanks, Doug. Doug, what's I mean, I've driven past this, you know, quite a bit, but what's the predominant use in this area? It seems like there's sort of that the highway sort of
right
is a distinction between these uses and more of the retail and the shops and the
exactly
restaurants.
This is kind of on an island here. It's almost surrounded by MG, manufacturing general districts, which have much more intensive land uses. The highway really bisects this CCP district, and then beyond that point, you're getting into the form-based code areas, which is a much more walkable neighborhood. So the highway going through right to the east of this building basically separates this facility from the rest of that commercial district in Walnut Hills. So, you know, being surrounded primarily by manufacturing uses and manufacturing zoning, I don't see any downfall to not having this strictly as a pedestrian oriented building.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks, Doug. Anything from the applicants in response to any of my questions or what Doug has said so far?
I don't think I have anything to add. It seems like we're in agreement.
Okay. Anything in closing or otherwise before we adjourn?
Not that I'm aware. So how does this work for adjourning? Do y'all review and make a determination and get back to us, or do y'all vote today? Or
Yeah, so it's a unilateral decision by myself as a zoning hearing examiner, and you know, I've reviewed the application based on the staff report and the testimony here today. I'm going to approve this, and so I can sort of give you that assurance verbally now. But the process is that I need to actually, you know, formalize that decision in a written approval. And so that's typically, you know, it takes a little bit more time as these enter the queue. I aim to have them out within 2 weeks. And so as soon as I finish those, I put them into a PDF and I email them to everybody who's in the hearing today. As soon as you have that actual written decision of approval, then you can start working with the zoning department and with Doug to get the necessary permitting before you begin. So that's just sort of the broad strokes of how the process works. But I can tell you today that this will be approved.
I appreciate that.
Wonderful, thank you.
And for information on how we're moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, no problem. If you guys have any other questions in the interim, just feel free to reach out to myself or to Doug. And we can either give you a status update on the decision or answer any other questions that come up in the meantime.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Unless there's anything else from you guys now, I think we'll leave it at that. I appreciate everyone's time and testimony here today. Yeah, have a wonderful day.